Welcome to the Elk Talk Podcast with Randy Newberg and Corey Jacobsen. Presented by the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation.
The goal is, what little you and I know about elk hunting, we share with people.
I've got an elk building, it's like 120 yards away. What do I do? First off, the thought would never cross my mind when an elk's being 120 yards away to call anybody on a cell phone.
All elk?
All the time? Only elk?
Only elk.
Well, it's us having conversations, so we usually go down some rabbit holes, but
If you hunt with Corey Jacobsen, you will find the landscape is full of rabbit holes. We're just going to make this up as we go.
and you look at it like, oh, that's a target-rich environment. But if you're trying to single one out, a solo target there is much easier to go into than a big group.
We record everything, so there's no BS and no lying, no faking it with us.
Did we hit the record button?
I forgot to hit the record button. If you want to know something about elk hunting, this probably isn't the podcast to listen to. Should we give them a list of all the other podcasts where they might learn something?
All right, folks, welcome to another episode of the Elk Talk Podcast. I am excited for this one, and I think a lot of you have been looking forward to this podcast as well. We'll get into the details here in just a minute, but before we do, just want to make sure and recognize our sponsors. The Elk Talk Podcast is brought to you by the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, and Randy and I are huge advocates of being a member of the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation and supporting what they support, which is enhancing elk habitat and providing access for elk and elk hunting. So definitely support the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. You can learn more, you can join, you can become a member there. The $35 that you spend a year goes back on the ground, and there's several projects that you can check out in your area that the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation is involved in. So RMEF.org is the website there. Before we get too much farther, though, I definitely want to introduce our guest today, which we've only had a couple guests on the podcast in the past. And David Brinker is back with us here today for this episode. And David, you were on episode 6, I believe.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
When we were at the Total Archery Challenge in Big Sky, Montana. So thanks for taking the time out in between elk hunting here to join me.
Absolutely. I need a break. They're winning.
People don't understand, they see, man, you're living the dream. You're hunting 20 days in September or whatever it is. And it's tiring. It's physically and mentally and emotionally taxing. And
yeah, it can take its toll for sure.
And I know everybody there
especially, when I have 3 young kids.
Yeah.
And trying to balance all that is a whole nother podcast we should do sometime.
Totally. Yeah. And I think people right now are not feeling too sorry for us, but
exactly. Yeah. Cry me a river.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll go through our sponsors here real quickly, and then we'll jump in because we have a pretty awesome story to tell about our time together during this elk season. But the Elk Talk Podcast, in addition to the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, is sponsored by Sitka Gear. And David, I think you've got a little familiarity with Sitka Gear. Is that right?
A little bit. Thousands and thousands of hours, probably. Yeah, it's a phenomenal company. I was part of that brand for 11 years, and my last day there was June 1st of this year, but I'm still talk to those guys every day, and if I know them, they're going to continue to keep coming out with some amazing stuff. So
totally. No, it's actually how you and I met. I think you were fresh out of college, like days maybe out of college.
I was probably still in college because I worked for Sitka for about almost a year, just under a year, while I was in college. So I was working remotely.
Yep.
In fact, my first 3 or 4 months at Sitka was an internship. I got college credit for it. I bet people are also feeling sorry for me for that. It's really hard.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, we, I don't remember what year we met, 2007, 2008, something. When did you start there? Right out there?
Probably over the phone, 2007, but in person, 2008, I would guess.
Yep, I think that's when I came down pig hunting down there.
That's right. When is that the flight that I booked where you had to fly to 4 different airports to get there?
I tell you what, so David has been in charge of a lot of travel that I've been associated with, and it seems like going from Boise to Salt Lake City or to Bozeman or to San Francisco, wherever it is, it should be a pretty direct flight, and somehow I end up going through Minneapolis and Chicago and then Tallahassee, and it's
oh man, I would scroll all the way down to an Expedia for the least convenient flights for Corey just so I could hear him whine about it.
I think that was the only good part about you leaving Sitka is you don't have to worry about seeing the entire
Corey,
country.
Do you mind laying over in London to come to Sacramento?
No, Sitka Gear, awesome company, awesome gear. Randy and I have been believers from the beginning and continue to be definitely innovators in turning clothing into gear. Another sponsor for us is Gobert Gear. And Randy's been involved with Gobert forever. And of course, everybody knows Gobert and the multi-tools and their knives and all of that and how handy the products are in the field. Randy was sharing with me, and I actually don't have one, but I'm going to be getting one. They've got a multi-tool that's got the socket function, and you can interchange a whole bunch of different bits on it. So he's got that in his toolkit in the field because it's got Allen bits that basically, instead of having an Allen wrench set, you can do all the adjustments on your bow and everything right there with the multi-tool from Gobert. So another great company that we're super excited to have as a part of the podcast and supporting what we do. Go Hunt, and David, you're familiar with Go Hunt, I know.
Love those guys. Yeah. Amazing product.
Great guys and great company, and just I can't stress the value that comes from an insider membership. And right now, if you go to gohunt.com/elk talk, you're going to go to a special landing page with a picture of Randy and I on it. And you're going to be able to sign up for a free 30-day trial to Go Hunt Insider. And it's the full menu. There's nothing restricted. You get access to everything there for free for 30 days, which it's not a 7-day or a 24-hour trial. You get 30 days to get in there, and that's you'll fall in love. If you go in there, go to gohunt.com/elk talk, and just sign up for that free 30-day trial. Browse around. You're going to be able to look at statistics as far as draw odds. You're going to be able to see, basically you can filter down all the different criteria that you're looking for in a hunt. You can see hunts that you can purchase over the counter versus, if you have points in a certain state. You can drill it down to success rates, to basically trophy quality. And, that's kind of subjective, but if you're looking for an area that holds 300 plus bulls, you can put that as a filter and sort it out, and it'll basically show you the map and highlight the units that meet your criteria. So it's incredibly handy. There's all sorts of strategy articles and just a wealth of information. If you hunt out of state, especially, you need to check out Go Hunt. And then Onyx Maps. I know you and I have both looked at the app on mobile devices out in the field, and Onyx is an incredible. I'm
not real sure what people did before it.
That's. I said the same thing the first time I got a GPS, which wasn't very long ago. I was way behind the curve on that, but yeah, I don't know where my GPS is anymore, because with Onyx, you have everything you need in the field for navigation, for research, for finding the path, for tracking where you've been, everything. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, I gave my GPS to my dad, and I just carry my iPhone now.
Yep.
Download the maps that I need, and it's super handy and really easy. That way I don't have two things in my pocket anymore.
Exactly. And you have your phone anyway, because everybody has their phone with them now. So
yeah, I'm taking pictures and videoing constantly on my phone, so yep. I keep it pretty handy.
And we'll talk about that more in a bit. Not to tease anyone, but we'll get to that. Go to onyxmaps.com and use the promo code ELKTALK, and you're going to save $20 or 20% when you sign up for their app membership, their hunt membership there. So that gets you the state of your choice. You can sign up for multi-states if you hunt multiple states, and like David said, you can download maps of specific areas up to 10-mile resolution and have that with you offline in the field. So even if you're going in the backcountry and don't have access, those maps are downloaded. Everything that's turned on when you download it is turned on when you get to the backcountry. So truly a valuable resource. And then our last sponsor is Rocky Mountain Hunting Calls. And David, we had a chance to blow a few calls this season together. And
you sounded amazing, and I sounded like a dying dinosaur.
Well, it didn't
but it had
really
nothing to do with the calls. It had more to do with the skill behind the person blowing them.
And I was going to say, the quality of the calls didn't seem to change the outcome of the call-ins. So,
no, I actually, in all seriousness, love the calls that you brought with you. I actually hadn't used Rocky Mountain calls prior to you getting to Oregon this year, just because I'd always used Primos, and I was kind of comfortable with them, and I still like my Primos calls, but I started using the ones you left behind with me after you left. In the last couple of weeks, it's been incredible. So
that's awesome. Which one are you liking?
The green one.
Yeah, the All-Star.
Yep. The green one is the best for me and I can't really figure out why. Maybe you could explain that to me in another podcast, but it just seems to fit my mouth better, and I can make better sounds with it. So
yeah, it's definitely in the Elk 101 Signature Series lineup from Rocky Mountain Hunting Calls. It's the most versatile. It's the one that's made to be an all-star. It does everything. So cow call, bugles, big bugles, little cow calls, whatever you want to do, it'll do it all.
Yeah.
So, and we've got a promo code for Rocky Mountain Hunting Calls. If you go to their website at RockyMountainHuntingCalls.com and use the promo code Elk Talk, you're going to save 15% on all of your elk call purchases there. So with that out of the way, David, as we alluded to, we sat down at the Total Archery Challenge here. What's it been, 2 months ago?
Yeah.
Almost 2 months ago.
Late July.
Yeah. And we talked about our plans to hunt Roosevelt elk together in Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
And how excited I was, because I'd never hunted Roosevelt elk before. And as the hunt got closer, we found out you were bailing on us and leaving us kind of high and dry for opening day. No, I
had some unfortunate changes of plans that I had to attend to, so I missed. I guess I missed the first 2 hunts, right?
Yeah, the whole first day, and then the next day as well, the morning. Then I think you were at camp that afternoon.
Right. I missed the first 3 hunts. You're right.
Yeah. But the good news is you left us in very qualified hands, and it was an absolute blast to hunt with Brent and get to know him and his dad, Eric, a little bit better. Great guys and great resources for Roosevelt elk hunting.
Yeah, that country we took you to it's national forest, and in Western Oregon, the national forest can be thinned, but it can't be clear cutted. And for those of you that know the habitat, elk love clear cuts in Western Oregon because the sun can actually get to the ground.
Yeah, because they can actually navigate through it.
Yeah, so a lot of the better elk hunting is on private timber company, where they manage the forests, and there's a lot of good elk hunting on national forest too. The difference is it's really brushy, and it takes a lot of time and scouting to find where the elk are. There's a ton of country, and there's not a lot of it that has elk in it, at least in the area that we were hunting. So you got to find the pockets, and it just takes years of just, as Corey can attest to, brush busting and scratching the heck out of yourself and dealing with all the bugs and lizards and everything else that's in the jungle there. And my buddy Brent and Eric were good. They were good people to have around. They know that area really well. So
I knew we were in good hands when opening morning. Well, first off, opening morning, we got out. We went to Plan A. And we were there at 3:30 a.m. and there was already 2 trucks there parked at the road. So we had to turn around and go to Plan B, and got there. It was probably about 4:30. And fortunately, Brent had another buddy that was in the area that went and saved the area for us. Went and drove there at 3:45 in the morning and saved a parking spot basically for us. And we got out and hiked, and we didn't hike 10 minutes, and there was a branch antlered bull down below us, right? It wasn't even daylight, it wasn't shooting light, but we could see him through the binoculars 100 yards below us. And we walked another, I don't even think it was a half a mile, and got on the ridge and let out a couple cow calls, and some cows started going crazy below us, and a bull started bugling. And this was August 25th in Roosevelt Elk Country. And so we were immediately on elk, and to see the low density of elk that we were hunting as the week progressed, and to realize how valuable it is to know that area and to know those pockets, we would have definitely been wandering around without much hunting action on our own.
And it's frustrating wandering through that country, as you learned.
Yeah, it's more like crawling and scrambling, and it's not really wandering.
Yeah. It's crazy. There'll be, 6 elk in a pocket, and then you got to go another mile through a whole bunch of really bad stuff, and then there's another 8 elk or 10 or whatever. You're usually not the only person that knows about these, let's just call it 10 to 15 spots within an area. So you're always juggling people. I mean, it's public land hunting, right? It's no different than anywhere else, except, the density of the elk is low, and they tend to be a little shyer. I don't know what, Corey, I'd love to know what you thought. You were out there August 25th through the 1st, I think, is the week that you were there.
Yep.
And which is early, obviously, but in Roosevelt country, from my experience, you can still call them in. They still bugle, and they're still kind of ruddy. They're just kind of then starting to go with the cows, and there's still bulls that aren't with cows yet, but you can still get them going. I'm interested in what was, the golden question with Roosevelt is, do they talk? And I'd love to see what you think after being there for a week.
Yeah, and it's, I certainly am not an expert by any means at this point. And we sampled that early season part of it. But I came away from it basically, Roosevelts and Rocky Mountain elk are the same elk. I mean, they really, as far as vocalization, as far as tactics for calling them in, the thing that is completely different is the terrain and the effects that the geography has on the elk, both in terms of where they live, how they move and all of that, but also weather, thermals, all of that's completely different. You have to really adapt to that. But as far as, they bugled August. We heard a bugle every day we were there. Some of the days it was literally just a bugle, but we did hear an elk vocalize every day. I'd went into it, and my dream for a Roosevelt hunt was hunting the old growth timber, just the dark black timber, open with green ferns. And, I'd always said, I want that experience like from Jurassic Park, where you have this old growth black timber with green ferns and fog coming up and this mist, and this elk just materializes, this white body materializes, and these red and black antlers come through it. And I got that. And it was an epic day in Roosevelt Elk Country. And I'm not going to spoil the outcome there, but we are launching Destination Elk, which is a day-by-day video series on the Elk 101 YouTube channel on November 12th. And I think that was
that had been day
5?
4?
Four or five, somewhere in there. Yeah. So pretty early in the series, you're going to see my dream situation for a Roosevelt hunt come to fruition. So we hunted that. There was a lot of that, but we also got to experience the absolute, I don't even know how to explain the density of the brush there.
Basically, I told Corey that there was a trail that went up to the top of this mountain, and I swore to him that there was. The problem was I forgot to remember that I hadn't been up that trail in 11 years. And when he got back off the hill, he said, "There's no trail." I'm like, "Yeah, there's a trail." He's like, "There's no trail. I just got done crawling on my belly."
The growth rate of brush in that country is definitely faster than 11 years, because there was he didn't tell us there was a trail. You told us there was a road.
Oh, that's right. I did tell you there's a road. There is a road there somewhere. You might have to get all the way on the ground on your belly. And
yeah, we were there. I still didn't see the road. It was unbelievably frustrating to try to navigate through that. We had an elk bugling, and we could hear it from where we were, and we had a decision to make whether to go back the way we had come, which actually would have been really easy, or to go straight to the elk, and we opted to go straight to the elk. And we had about 50 minutes of shooting light, and we made it to the elk after 45 minutes of just absolute brush beating. And I grew up in North Idaho. I know what brush is like, and this is brush that you can't even explain.
And that bull's, he likes the brush.
they're safe. We called him into 8 yards, and we didn't even see the brush move between us and him. That's how thick it was. We couldn't see him.
Could you even see a piece of the elk?
We didn't. No, there was no piece of the elk. The brush is so thick. He was moving through that thick brush, and I could hear him. It sounded like he was going to step on us any second, and we still couldn't even see the brush moving. That's how thick it was.
Yeah. But that's all part of the experience. A lot of close shooting over there where we were.
Yeah.
And it was a really fun week.
It was not as fun as I had hoped for, because we didn't get to hunt with you for as many days as we had anticipated. And,
I tapped out, didn't I?
Yeah, let's talk about that. So day 2, you showed up that evening, and I don't remember. Oh, we went for that short hike up through that phenomenal old growth stuff up above camp.
That was the night I felt like we all dove in a swimming pool in all of our Sitka gear.
Yeah,
and we got I won't spoil it, but we got an answer way down in one of those holes that Corey was just describing. I've never, even in that country, I've never been in blowdown like that. And we were all soaking. There's no gear on the planet that could have kept you dry in that weather. It was like a heavy drizzle, and when it does that, all the leaves collect like a 1/4 inch of rain, and you're wading through salmonberries, and you just get drenched.
Yep. And
we did that. We were drenched for probably 2 hours, but Donnie had to hear that bugle down that hole, and we dove in there all the way until after dark. But that was the first evening.
I'm still convinced he didn't hear a bugle, but I gave him the benefit of the doubt, and we went after it.
I certainly didn't hear it, but I've never claimed to be, to have the best ears.
Yeah, that was the first evening. The next day, what did we do the next day? I've got it all written down here. I kept a journal all season.
We dove down into that hole by camp.
Oh, that's right.
Didn't get into much that morning.
Yep.
I don't think. We didn't have much happen. There was a little bit of fresh elk sign and stuff, but we couldn't get anything to talk that I recall.
Yep. And then the next
night,
we
went back over to the area you went opening day.
Yeah, and had the elk shot out from under us. We were actually calling a bull in, and he was screaming his head off, and then all of a sudden it got kind of quiet, and I said, I hear voices. And everybody's looking at me saying, no, it's the elk. The elk are still coming. I'm like, no, I hear human voices, like a girl's voice. And sure enough, we pop over the ridge, and there's a hunter and his wife there that had shot the elk, intercepted it as it was coming towards us. And so we got to look at a nice Roosevelt bull laying on the ground and hike out in the dark that night.
That was a little deflating, but I was happy for whoever got it. It's public land.
Yeah. Totally.
But yeah, we were in that thing for quite a while that evening.
Yeah. Yeah, we were in elk for sure.
And then
so the next day we went kind of back to that same area, and we went to the top, and our plan was to drop off the top. And I'm used to hunting at 8,000, 9,000 feet. And when I say drop off, you go into, 6,500, 7,000. It's huge elevation. And over there, you don't have as much elevation. But for where we hunted and what I saw, it was a pretty steep and big mountain we were on and dropping off of it.
I just think when you add brush and or the density, although that area is not terrible, but yeah, you probably lose like 500 feet or something. It's
I was going to say, I thought it was 800 down to where we ended up.
Yeah, it could have been.
Yeah, it was steep. It was a good decline, and we
didn't have much going on there. Oh no, we jumped a couple elk right off the bat.
Yep.
That we think were cows, and then Yeah, we were just working our way down that mountain in that drainage, trying to find something that wanted to talk. We weren't too far from where that bull got shot in between us the night before, maybe a half mile or something. But there's a lot of elk spread out in that area. So we were kind of just, we were actually going to roam pretty much that whole day. It's a huge basin and just kind of keep going until we found something that wanted to talk.
Yeah. And so,
and then we found ourselves eating huckleberries. I think I remember.
I remember some really good huckleberry patches on that hillside. and these aren't. I'm in Idaho, and so I'm used to normal huckleberries that grow. You know, the bushes are about belly button high, and you can sit down and you pick these loaded huckleberries on it. We got over there. I couldn't reach some of the huckleberries above my head. The brush was literally 9-10 feet tall, with these huckleberries hanging down off of it, tempting us from above. And so as we're walking down this steep hill, we got into some really good huckleberry patches, and we definitely partook.
Really good in a lot of ways and not so good in some other ways.
Well, hard to navigate through. And as we were walking down the hill, you know, I think we were totally into hunt mode. We were just getting to that basin, and things were going to get good. We had good thermals. We were full on hunt mode. And I'll share my version of the event just up to when it happened. Then I'll let you share. But we're kind of ahead of David, and David's doing some Instagram live, and so he's just, you know, as we'd stop and bugle, he'd share that, and we got, I don't know, we were 30 or 40 yards ahead of you maybe, and there was Donnie and myself, and then our camera guy John. And then David was lagging back a little bit. And so we're getting down. We're totally stealth mode. We're getting ready to drop down on this bench. And all of a sudden from back behind me, I hear, "Hey, guys." And you have to understand, we're elk hunting. And so to hear somebody yell out, "Hey, guys," it's kind of, I'm like, hold on. David Brinker knows we're elk hunting. He knows that you don't just yell while we're elk hunting. Does he not have an elk call that he couldn't cow call to us and get our attention? I mean, you don't just yell out. He's going to scare all the elk off. And so that kind of set up the situation that followed there. So go ahead and share kind of leading up to that.
I think you cow called at me once.
Oh, I did. When you said, "Hey, guys," I cow called back because I'm like, you don't need to yell. Let's communicate with a cow call here.
Yeah. No, we were eating in those huckleberries and we were just kind of getting in the rhythm of the day, I think. It was probably 8 o'clock in the morning or 7:45 or something, you know. We didn't have much going on. In fact, I think we had also ran out of fresh sign. So we were kind of just, like I said, roaming and just kind of trolling.
Yep.
And getting into some country that potentially probably hasn't been hunted that season because most people don't go all the way down there.
Yeah, we were in a hole for what we saw on the train. We were in a hole, and it was,
yeah, that's about as big as it gets over there.
Yep.
And you know, I am constantly taking pictures and filming and stuff. A, for myself, I like looking through them the rest of the year, and B, for my social media, because I post on social media just like everybody else in this industry. And for some reason that morning, I've rarely ever done Instagram Live. I think I've probably only done it like 2 or 3 times. We were just walking down the mountain. I had full service, and I'm like, oh, this would be a good time just to try it. Heck, I don't even know how many people sign on. 5, I don't know. And so I turned it on, and I was just walking through the brush and pointing my phone ahead of me. And you're going through these big huckleberry patches, and so you're kind of having to, and the ferns are also above waist high.
Yeah.
So I was like filming and pushing the huckleberry limbs with my, with my filming hand, like I was with the hand that was in my phone. Then I had my bow in my left hand. So I was just kind of wading through brush and filming, and people were getting a kick out of that. I was just showing them how brushy it was. I think there was probably only 10 people signed on or something, you know. But I was just trying it out. And, you know, I'm going through these ferns, and all of a sudden I get a really, really sharp pain in my leg. And I look down, and one of my arrows pops out of my leg. And I immediately knew it had jerked out of my quiver in the brush. And I had basically stepped into it with my calf, and it went So I immediately I knew kind of the drill, just instincts. I just dropped everything, and the blood was already drenching I had core bottoms on and it's my scent pants. And the blood was already drenching all the way through my core bottoms and my scent pants. And, so I put both thumbs on it as hard as I could and just tried to stop the bleeding, which I sort of did, but it was still kind of coming from under my thumbs. But I just held it as hard as I could. And that's when I yelled, "Hey guys, got a problem."
Yeah, so he yelled out, "Hey guys," and I called back, hoping to convince him to communicate with elk language so we didn't scare all the elk off in the area. And he responded, "Guys, I cut myself pretty bad." And so you're stopped there 30, 40 yards ahead of him, and I hear that, and we're in hunt mode, and I think, all right, he cut himself. He scratch his arm on some brush, or did he fall down and hit a stub and cut his hand or something? And so we kind of stopped there for a minute and turned around, and we're slowly, just making our way back up there, thinking, all right, we'll get up there, and he's probably just stopping, putting a Band-Aid on or something. And all of a sudden he says, "Guys, seriously, I cut myself. It's pretty bad. Can you come up here?" And so we started picking up the pace a little bit. And in my mind, it's still the whole trying to process, okay, what could possibly be going on here? And then he yells out and says, "Please hurry, it's bad." And then, then it starts going into, okay, we're talking broadhead, we're talking knife, something's happened here. And I'm not a first responder. I'm not trained much beyond basic first aid, Boy Scout type first aid. And as we're going up there, all these thoughts are going through my mind. It's like, you've got to pull yourself together here. This might be a really serious situation. And when we walked up, I don't think any of us were, even as with all the scenarios going through our mind, were as prepared for the amount of blood that was there. And it looked like we had shot an elk and the elk had died right there. And there was blood on the ground. There was blood on the leaves. Your pant from the knee all the way down inside your boot was soaked. You mentioned you had your base layer in your pants. You also had gaiters on, if I remember right.
Oh, you're right. I forgot about that. I had Thunderhead gaiters on too. Yeah. So it went through all three things pretty quickly. And
still buried. And we're talking, which broadhead was it you were shooting?
I shoot the Valkyrie Jagger. It's a 200 grain 3-blade broadhead, and it went all the way in past the ferrule.
Yeah, and it's like a 2-inch long broadhead. It's not a short little steep angle broadhead. It's a long one. So we got there, and obviously he's laying on the ground, back up against a tree. He's got two hands holding his leg, and he said, I stepped on the broadhead. It stuck in my leg. It's laying here somewhere. So we found it, put it up in a tree where it was secure, and just kind of went into, I wouldn't say automatic, but having not been trained for that, having not experienced that kind of a situation before, we kind of, the cool thing was, afterwards looking back, John, the cameraman, kept the camera going. As we walked up there and, started into all this, he filmed the whole thing. So we've got a really cool film to share from that day, and obviously a blood trail that wasn't the kind of blood trail we were looking for. But
the only thing, I don't really remember how it came out. I think it fell out. I don't think I pulled it out. And then once you guys got up there, I remember, because all I wanted to know, because if I would have hit an artery, it would have been a pretty rough situation, because we weren't anywhere near the road. We were, quite a ways, and from just my initial analysis of getting a helicopter in there was pretty low odds. Yeah. So I was like, I think I remember asking, do you think I hit an artery? Because I was still holding. You got to keep in mind, I was still holding it as hard as I could with both thumbs. Yep. So hard that I felt like I could barely move my thumbs after I took them off a little bit later. Like I was just trying to keep it from stopping bleeding. And because I still wasn't sure. I hadn't. Because as soon as I saw the arrow come out, I put my thumbs on it. So I didn't know if it was... I've hit arteries on animals. I've seen how fast you bleed out. It's not good. And so I would say, and Corey, you can tell me if I'm crazy, but I would say I was actually pretty calm. I just wanted to know that, it was comforting to have those guys there. And I asked Corey, do you think I hit an artery? Because if I did, there were some things I wanted to do. Yeah. A, like we were going to probably have a different protocol, like call 911 and try to get him in here. And B, I knew I had probably passed out. And then C, I wanted to call my family because I didn't know if I was going to die. I mean, I know that sounds dramatic, but if you've ever hit an animal in an artery, like the aortic artery or the femoral artery or any of the arteries, it's quicker than a lung shot.
Oh, absolutely.
It's really bad.
And there was enough blood there.
You have a couple major arteries in your leg. I didn't know until after when I went to the hospital exactly what's in your calf. But I knew that it was anyways. So once Corey kind of comforted me and said, no, I don't think so. It seems like it's, we would know that by now. I can't remember exactly what you said.
No, and when I walked up, you said, how bad is it? And I said, and in my mind, I'm just thinking, okay, I've got to stay calm and I've got to keep you calm. And so as I walked up there, you said, is it bad? And I said, oh, it's pretty bad. Yeah, but you're going to be fine. And I remember saying, you're going to be fine, and thinking, I don't know that for sure, but I don't need him freaking out right now. So I'm going to tell him he's going to be fine. But deep down inside, in my mind, I don't know that. I'm not convinced of that yet. Yeah. And so we kind of, we dropped down. I think I kind of took charge more out of just, okay, we've got to be very systematic about this. We have to get the bleeding stopped. We have to get pressure on it. And we all kind of opened our bags, and I just reached in, grabbed my game bags, grabbed my knife, and started stripping the game bag into basically gauze. And so we wrapped, we made a compression, basically gauze with a strip of the game bag. And we put that on the wound. And so I gave it to Donnie, and I told David, lift your thumbs and we've got to get this on it quick. So he did. We put the compression on there, and then we wrapped it with another strip of game bag. And before we really thought through it all, I think we wrapped some electrical tape around the center of that. And you have to remember, this is on the calf. So it's going from a big muscle, and then it's getting narrower as the calf goes down. And as soon as we wrapped it with that electrical tape, I don't remember if we let go or what happened, but the whole thing, the compression, the bandage, everything slid down the leg and basically exposed the wound again. And so Donnie at that point took his thumbs and put on the wound and held it on there. And, to hear him tell the story, he could feel the blood pushing up on his thumbs, trying to squirt up out of there. And anytime that we did relieve that pressure, lose that pressure, blood didn't just trickle out. It was full on squirts of blood. So, like David said, we weren't sure that we weren't in a main artery there. Yeah. And, there was a lot of blood.
Yeah, I remember that being frustrating too, because when it slipped a little bit, because it's not like we had a lot of materials to work with.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll get into the learnings there, but game bags and electrical tape and stuff like that. I think we had enough to do one more round.
Yep. So we did another compression and another strip and got it on there. And that's when I said, okay, hold that there and give me a second. And we had some Leuco tape, which, you use on your feet to prevent hot spots and blisters, and it adheres really well to skin. And so we wrapped the top of the bandage with the Leuco tape and then wrapped the bottom of it and adhered it to the skin so it wouldn't slide up and down. And then we did a second layer of the compression bandage, and then another wrap around that, and then Leuco taped that. And then we took then we used some Gorilla tape and stripped it so it was a little bit smaller strips, and kind of secured everything, make sure it wasn't moving. But even at that point, we were still holding the thumb on the side of the wound over the compression bandages, and knew we had to keep pressure on it. And I think that was probably the most innovative thing we did was how we kept the pressure on the wound there.
I disagree. I think the most innovative thing you did was the lighter.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's to put the pressure on the wound.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I for some weird reason, like we didn't have self-service all week, but for some reason we had self-service right there. And I was able to FaceTime with a friend of mine, Tom Van Ash, a bow hunting buddy of mine, who also is a retired emergency room surgeon, and show him the the job that Corey and Donnie did, and man, he was impressed over the face. It was pretty cool. He's like, man, you guys did a good job with what you had. Yeah. And, it was pretty comforting too, because he's like, yeah, I don't think, it doesn't seem like you hit anything major. There's only a couple things down there that are important, but doesn't look like you got them. And even later on, obviously jumping ahead a little bit, but later on when the doctor looked at it, they're like, wow, that was really inventive to put a lighter there on the pressure point. I'm like, yeah, it wasn't my idea, but my buddies did it.
So we basically just took a lighter and put it right on top of the wound site. And then Donnie had an extension strap on his backpack. We took it off, so it had a male end and a female end. And we put it around the lighter and then basically cinched it like a tourniquet. We didn't use it as a tourniquet and cinch it tight, but it put that pressure on the lighter. And with that lighter being raised surface like that, it pushed down onto the wound and basically held those compressions and that gauze in place on the side of the wound to keep it from, to add pressure and stop the bleeding. And then we wrapped everything up with electrical tape and with Gorilla Tape. And it looked like a farmer had done the job. But the cool thing was no more blood came through the outer layer. So we knew after a couple minutes that we'd stopped the bleeding, at least slowed it down to the point we weren't concerned with blacking out or passing out or loss of life.
Yeah, and at that point, it'd probably been a half hour at that point. And I'd been with a buddy last year who almost passed out. He cut himself really bad taking care of an elk. And he almost passed out immediately. And I'd made it that long, so I kind of was, you know how you kind of, you get in your own head a little bit. It's like, man, am I dizzy? Am I kind of like, am I saying weird stuff? But after that point, my adrenaline had kind of subsided. I wasn't shaking anymore, kind of coming down. I felt pretty conscious. So I'm like, okay, now my mind was kind of going, okay, now what? I hadn't tried to stand on it at that point. We were trying to keep it elevated. And we were making some phone calls because we were quite a ways in there. And our buddy Brent and Eric, who we mentioned earlier, they know that area really well. And we were trying to figure out the nearest point we could get a truck. And so that was kind of the next dilemma we had to. Oh,
couple things to interject.
My wife. What's that?
I was going to say a couple things to interject. One of the phone calls you made.
Yeah.
So David calls his wife and says, hey, just want to let you know, had a little bit of an accident here on the mountain, and I stuck an arrow with a broadhead in my leg, and I think we've got the bleeding stopped, and I think I'm going to be okay. And he started going down, that road of creating a little bit of doubt and in a loved one's mind to get a phone call like that. And so I said, give me the phone. And I grabbed the phone from like, Rachel, hey, it's Corey. Hey, David cut himself. It's not too bad. We got all the bleeding under control. We've got it all wrapped up here. We're just going to figure out the best way to get out of here, and we'll call you when we get out to the road. Just to ease her mind, because it was kind of going that direction that she could have probably taken it as, am I going to see you again? And so we got that mitigated. And then once we did get on the phone, having OnX was so valuable because we can share locations. So we just put a waypoint where we were and shared that location with Brent, or with Eric actually first. And he knew right where we were, and he was able to say, there's a road down underneath you, an old skid road. You can walk it out, and it'll eventually come out on the main road. And I know I can meet you at the main road. So from there, I took off, walking to go out and find out exactly how bad the road was, to see how far in we could get, and to meet him with a vehicle to know we had a path out. And I left Donnie and John there to make sure that David stayed conscious and awake.
Yeah, and we just sat there and drank water and ate snacks and kind of joked around. There's a lot of laughing. I'm looking forward to watching the film because I remember laughing a lot and just hanging out. And in fact, how when you get hurt, you don't want to believe how bad it is. So I'm like, you guys, I can get up and walk. Like, it may take me a while, but I'll get out. And they're like, no, you are not getting up. I'm like, come on, let me try. And Corey was pretty strict about it. You're like, dude, you are not, like, if that thing starts bleeding again, we are out of materials. Like, that would not be a good thing to do.
Well, and you have to remember where the cut is. It's literally in the center of the calf from the side, and it slid basically along the back of the leg bone there. So every step that you take is flexing that calf muscle. And it's just, in my mind, it's going to tear open that wound in a heartbeat the second you put, even stand up on it, put pressure on it. And so you just didn't want to take that chance.
And that was a good move. In hindsight, I'm so glad that you talked me out of that, because shoot, I could barely walk for 2 weeks. I wouldn't have been able to walk. And the bleeding didn't stop for a week. Yeah. Like after the wound, like just with the, I had to change bandages constantly. So that would not have been smart.
Yep. Well, and looking back, I think you enjoyed the method that we used to get you out of there a lot more than we did. And
yeah, it was. I did enjoy that. It was really nice.
Yeah. Before we get to that, so I hiked out. It was, I believe, 2.5 miles from where we were out to the main road, and it was downhill. Wasn't too steep. It was fairly gradual. And not far below where we were, there was an old skid road. And so I hit it and started walking it. And I walked for probably a half a mile thinking, we can get a 4-wheeler in here. It may be a closed road, but we're going to take a chance. If we have to ride a 4-wheeler on a closed road to get David out, we will. And, we'll deal with the consequences later if there are some. But then I got about a half mile down and the entire road was washed out. And not just a little washout. I've taken some ATVs places that weren't the safest, and this was one that made me think, if we have a winch, I may be able to get an ATV across it, but I'm not certain. And I walked about another 1/4 mile, there's another washout, and it was clear there was no way we were getting over that one. So I got out. There ended up being, I think, 6 washouts across the road. And after about an hour, Brent showed up. He left work. We'd called him. He left work because he knew the area, loaded up his ATV, showed up, and he and I jumped on with a machete, which you'll find out if you hunt the coastal range over there. Machete, everybody has a machete because that's how you can actually navigate. And we headed up the road, and we made it about 1.25 miles before we came to one of the worst washouts, and we just couldn't get the 4-wheeler across. So there was no way. Just literally no physical way to go any farther. So we took off hiking from there. When we got in, John and Donnie had carried you down to the skid road, I believe. And you guys you were close. We called you and told you we were heading in to get down to the road.
Yeah.
And so we got in there, met up with you, and I'll let you kind of walk us through the different methods we attempted to use to navigate and to pack you out.
Yeah, no, Donnie and John pretty much carried me down to it was only 40 or 50 yards, but it was really brushy, and got down to the road and just kind of laid in the road and elevated my leg again, because we didn't want to start bleeding, and just waited. And, thankfully pretty soon I saw Corey and Brent walking up, and Brent's a pretty big guy. He's a big, strong guy, and so is Corey. And thankfully, because is that called fireman style, the way I had to ride out of there?
Well, the first thing we did, I don't know what they call it, but basically you put your arm, each of us got on each side of you. You put your arm around us and basically started limping out on your good leg. So you were hopping along with one leg kind of, your bad leg tucked up behind you.
And we didn't find that to be too efficient.
No, it was wearing you out really quickly. Your leg, you weren't going to be able to hop 2.5 miles on one leg, and it was awkward for us because it wasn't just we weren't walking a road. It was an old, grown-in logging road that was brushed in, had windfalls and everything. So then we thought, well, we'll pick you up and carry you. So we did the same concept. You had your arm around each of us, one on each side, and we grabbed your thigh and lifted you up and basically started carrying you. And that was awkward because we're off balance. We're kind of pulling against each other, and one of us would start stumbling and it would yank you one way. And I think it was pretty uncomfortable for you. So then we got the stick. Then we found a green tree and broke it down so it was about 5 feet long. And you sat on it and put your arms around each of us again, one on each side. And we lifted the stick and started carrying the stick that you were sitting on, trying to do that. And that didn't work.
That wasn't terribly efficient.
Yeah. I don't know, did we try, were there other things in there?
We tried just the one guy, me just putting my bad side on, just kind of limping along with him. That didn't work very well either.
Yeah.
And by the time we'd done these 3 or 4 different strategies, we'd only gone 75 yards or so.
Yeah. And realized we've got at least a mile, if not, maybe a little farther to go. And I think it was Brent's idea, and he's a big guy. He's a big, strong guy, and fortunately, David was the smallest out of all of us there. And
except for my biceps.
Well, I mean, yeah, I'm talking overall mass, like weight. And Brent said, "What if we just do piggyback?" And so for the next, I don't know what it took us, 40 minutes, maybe.
Not too bad. 45 minutes.
Yeah, we took turns piggybacking David down the ridge. And I think the worst parts were when we'd come to those washouts where the road literally was just washed out and we had to navigate down the steep washout and then up the other side.
Yeah, that hurt. I remember that really hurting because it's almost impossible to walk downhill without flexing your calf, actually, or uphill. Even if you're like being held up, like you'll hit something and it'll stretch it or whatever. So that was pretty rough, but we got pretty lucky that old logging road was down there.
Had it not been there, it would have been a completely different situation. And
it wasn't closed. It was an open road. It's just brushed in.
Yep.
So that was also lucky, that there wasn't a gate on it. We wouldn't have to deal with that. But
yeah.
It was really fortunate, and it probably took, I don't know, like an hour and a half or something, which wasn't too bad to get me back.
Yeah.
To the rigs. And of course, I'm kind of crazy, and I was already thinking about how the reality was sinking in. It's like, wait a minute, I want to go elk hunting. Where are you guys going? Are you guys, because I'm like, you guys need to go on an evening hunt. They only had a couple days left, 2.5 days or something. And you guys get out of here. I'll go to the hospital. But then I'm like, wait a minute, I want to go with them. I'm like, well, I'm probably pretty screwed for that. I'm not going to be able to do that.
Yep. So yeah, it was, I don't know, what were we, probably 4 hours from the time that it happened until we got out to the truck. Because I hiked out the 2.5 miles, met Eric, waited there till Brent got there. And then Brent and I took the ATV in about a mile and a half, and then hiked back into you. And then packed you out and then put you on the ATV, and you actually drove the ATV by yourself, so you could put your foot up on the front rack and take the weight off that and keep it elevated. And then your dad had shown up and hiked in with Eric. So when we made it back there, you jumped in the truck with your dad, headed to the hospital, and we kind of all stood around trying to decide, man, what do we do next?
We go hunting.
I guess we go hunting.
Yeah. And I walked in those guys went hunting, which I was happy and jealous for. And my dad drove me to the nearest hospital, and it was kind of funny. I walked in there, and I don't know if this is what they're supposed to do or not, because I haven't been in the emergency room that much. But I walk in there and sit down, and the doctor walks up and looks at my leg, and he goes, and I had it unwrapped, and it was pretty gnarly, nasty. If you want to see it, it's on my Instagram. Or no, maybe it's not on my Instagram. I can't remember if I posted it or not, but maybe I will when this podcast comes out. But he looked at it, and it was pretty bad. And he goes, "So what made you think you need to come in here?" And I was so tired and like just done with it. I'm just like, I don't understand the question, I guess. Like, have you seen this?
I have a 2-inch deep hole in the side of my calf.
Well, he didn't understand, because I told him it was from an arrow, but he wasn't a bow hunter or anything, so he didn't understand. Like, he was just thinking like an arrow, like, well, where's the arrow? It's not sticking in there. I'm like, no, it's a broadhead. He's like, well, what's a broadhead? I'm like, it's like the blade. It's, I was trying to explain it.
Imagine 3 of your scalpels put together and jabbed into my leg 2 inches.
Yeah, exactly. Finally, one of the nurses walked in, and he was a bow hunter. And he's like, oh man, that had to have hurt. He got it immediately. And it wasn't the first time he'd seen something like that. So, they threw a few stitches in me and took some x-rays and stuff and made sure that, they can't, when you have a puncture wound, they usually don't stitch it. They usually just, because they want it to drain and stuff. It's kind of gross. But I kind of talked them into it, because I told them, like, I'm going hunting. like as soon as I can walk, I'm going hunting. He's like, well, I better put some stitches in it so it doesn't reopen up. I'm like, yeah, that'd be a good idea.
Yeah.
I went out of there on a wheelchair and went home and just waited for hunting reports from these guys. Very, very, very bummed out that I had, in many ways, or in a few ways, had kind of made a stupid error, but in also a few ways learned a ton.
Totally. No, and I think that's the takeaway from this whole situation of the podcast is we were fortunate. We had enough material to improvise and do what we needed to do. Game bags, a knife to cut the game bag up, Leuco tape, Gorilla tape, electrical tape, the lighter, the extension strap from the backpack. Those are all things that we used. And I know when I got home, I immediately grabbed a pen and I went and I wrapped, I've probably got 30 feet of Leuco tape now wrapped around that pen. I grabbed a roll of Gorilla tape and wrapped probably 30 feet of Gorilla tape around the pen. And then I grabbed some electrical tape and did the same thing. So I've got a pen that is, probably 1.5 inches in diameter now loaded up with tape just to be prepared. And in addition to that, it was neat because you'd mentioned, only 10 people tuned into your Instagram live, and there probably were a few more than that. But I think this incident probably helped blow up your Instagram page. I think you gained some followers through all of this.
People like seeing injuries for some reason. I don't know why.
And they also like giving advice on it. So reading through, I posted a picture of you there with blood on your pant leg, and then a picture of the aftermath, showing kind of the dressing that we had done there.
Yeah.
And I think each of those posts, were 120 plus comments. And there were several suggestions in there that I never go to the woods without this, or that's why I carry this, and you should look into this. And so as soon as I got back, I jumped online and started researching, things that would help in a serious situation like that. And I know I've got 3 new tools in my backpack that I carry with me now from that. And I had a first aid kit, but it's Band-Aids and Neosporin and, some super glue and just minimal stuff.
Yeah, no, I got so many messages and comments and phone calls, and it's just like, man, so much great information's out there. Where was I?
Yeah.
Like, why did I not even? And at the highest level, we can get into the details of some specific things that I will not do again and learned. But at the highest level, what I learned is hunting's. It's kind of dangerous in a lot of ways, and I think in a lot of ways that most of us hunters don't realize because we've done it so much and we're so confident in doing it. But the biggest thing that I learned is something's not really stupid until it's stupid. And it doesn't take much time. Everything can change in like a second, whether it be poking yourself with a broadhead or cutting yourself with a knife or falling off a cliff or a horse falling on you, whatever the accident is, you don't, of course you think everything that you do is so perfect and, everything, but I can guarantee you everybody out there that's listening right now, including me, I'm going to start hunting again tomorrow. There's probably something I'm doing right now that's dumb that I should be thinking about differently that could be dangerous. And, the bleeding thing is just such an obvious thing. You should have the right equipment to take care of bleeding. And I also had a first aid kit, just like everybody else. I have a good first aid kit too. But if I'd have been by myself, I don't know that I could have got to it. I was laying on my backpack, but I had to keep both thumbs on my wound, as you remember. And the first aid kit was buried in one of my pockets of my backpack. So I would have had to take my thumbs off the wound, get in my backpack, unzip the little first aid kit, unwrap whatever is in there, which I'm sure wasn't enough. And, I'd probably been fine. But since then, I've been talking to people that actually, specifically to the bleeding problem. My buddy Adam Foss, for instance, he carries, so in his hip pocket on whatever side it is of his backpack, he has his DeLorme and a tourniquet. Right there, and like some some of the main things that are in a first aid kit right there at his disposal. So if he falls when he's got 80 pounds coming out of sheep country, you're not going to roll over your 80-pound pack if you have a leg that's snapped in half. You know,
Yep.
You're going to have to deal with it kind of right there. So he knows he can get help and take care of like the very, very basic. Oh, he has a quick clot, the blood clotting.
Yep. And when you say a Delorme, it's the backcountry in-reach satellite messenger type thing, so he can get a message out.
Yep. And one of the best things that I own. And if you hunt alone and you have family and stuff that wants to hear from you.
Yep. So with that, you mentioned, I guess it's important to stress, we're out there for the very purpose of inflicting, as a bow hunter, inflicting massive blood loss in an animal. So we have the tools to be able to kill an animal quickly through massive blood loss. And those tools, those weapons are on our person at all times. And it doesn't take, a split second to turn that around and have that become a weapon towards us. If you're rifle hunting, shotgun, whatever it is, there's potential for those situations. So I think being prepared for that, for a bow hunter with a quiver full of 6 sharp arrows and a knife that is razor sharp to take care of the animal, and you get it, you've got potentials to cut yourself and potentially have a lot of blood loss. And you were, were you an inch away from a pretty main artery in your leg with the hole?
I was about an inch from one of them and 2 inches from the other one.
So at that point, we're talking main artery that feeds the whole lower half of the leg. It's substantial blood loss and a lot harder to get that bleeding stopped at that point. And I'll share what I now carry with me based on this situation. You'd mentioned quick clot, and quick clot it's recommended by all 5 branches of the military, and you can get it in a powder form, but they have it actually impregnated into gauze strips. And the ones I have, they're 3 inches by 24 inches. There's 2 of the strips, and it basically helps to clot blood, I think 5 times faster than the body alone. So you wrap that over a wound, and it'll help stop the bleeding 5 times faster. The other thing I got, somebody recommended, is zip stitch, and it's basically kind of like a butterfly bandage where you put it over, and it wouldn't necessarily be for this, but if you have a knife cut that's 2 inches long and it's laid open on your leg or your arm or something, you'd put this, and basically it's a butterfly bandage that goes on both sides of the cut, and then it has 5 little strips across it that are kind of like zip ties. And once you adhere the bandage to the skin, then you pull those zip ties and it closes that wound up. And basically they say that it's more effective than stitches because there's no scarring. It seals it right up. And then the other one is a tourniquet. And the one that I got, it's called the SWAT T, SWAT, SWAT T tourniquet. And the cool thing about it is it has little circles and squares on the tourniquet itself. It's kind of an elastic material, and you can use it as a compression wrap. So we could have used it to wrap around and get a tight compression and still not be a tourniquet, or you can stretch it tight enough that those shapes change into from a square to a diamond or from a circle to an oval, and at that point you know that you've got it at the right stretch to actually apply a tourniquet if that's what's needed. And so those 3 things, I don't think that together they weigh 4 ounces. So it's not like it's adding a whole bunch of bulk or a whole bunch of weight, but I feel a lot more confident in a situation like what we experienced there, that immediately we can grab those, put them on, and be confident that even if it was a little worse than what we experienced, we're still going to be okay.
Yeah, and literally all 3 of those things are what was the 3 most recommended things in the messages that I got, and I certainly won't leave home without them.
And they're inexpensive. We're talking $9 each, $12
it's nothing. And that was
each.
what's so dumb. And laying in my bed afterwards, like getting on Amazon and looking at these things, it's like, man, this is really dumb to not have these.
Yep.
And I know a lot of people out there are like, man, that is really dumb. I always have these, but there's a lot of people that don't.
A lot.
And because most people don't think they're going to get hurt. And obviously firsthand you can, and it can happen real quick.
And you don't until you do. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. And, I think the second main thing I learned, if you're out like being distracted and you're filming or taking pictures or getting on your social media or whatever, it's like, it's probably no different than driving or anything else. There's times for it, and there's times when you shouldn't be doing it probably. And I don't think it was terribly. I mean, I think a lot of people do what I was doing, which is just filming hunting.
Oh yeah.
And but I'm definitely going to be a little bit more careful. It's just not worth it, and just be a little bit more conscious. Like Corey said, you're carrying around 6 real sharp things, and you're in a bunch of brush, and it's steep, and I can barely, in that area, you can barely see the ground. It's like there's probably better spots to film, and so, but at the highest level, it's just trying to be more conscious about what you're doing. We all get so excited and passionate and just gun ho, and like you're blazing through the woods in the dark, and all these things that we all do that's pretty routine. There's things that can happen, and being prepared is super important. And coming back to your family's pretty awesome thing.
Yeah, and something we all want to do each time.
If that would have been the worst case scenario, that would have been a pretty stupid way to go.
Yep. Well, and I think even beyond that, we talked after we split and you went to the hospital, and we kind of said, hey, if we're going to use electronics, let's stop. If we need to look at onX maps, let's not be looking at the map while we're stumbling down the trail.
Yep.
Let's stop. And it's not that we were concerned about falling on a broadhead again, but it's really easy to trip or get tangled up and break a wrist or break an ankle or anything.
There's so many things that can happen.
Yeah, so little precautions there. But the other thing that we haven't mentioned was you were shooting the micro diameter arrows.
Yep.
And those arrows sometimes don't fit really well in a quiver.
Mm-hmm.
And, a good quiver will have adjustments on it so that you can tighten it down on there.
Yep.
And you have a good quiver that does that.
Yep.
And it just hadn't been adjusted all the way. And it's something I've always taken for granted that my arrows just snap in place, and I've never thought about them coming out.
Yeah, and mine were snug, but there was a whole nother turn or so that we could have done on those screws that would have totally solved this problem. Yep. And it's just one of those things that's dumb. But I just didn't. I'd hunted with that quiver all of last year, and
never had a problem.
It had no. Oh, well, I did. In thinking back afterwards, I actually do remember one time an arrow falling out of it. I thought it was my practice arrow, but I do vaguely remember an arrow falling out. But regardless, it doesn't matter. That was also a dumb thing. And it's just, like my dad and I were talking afterwards, it's like just taking time just to make sure your equipment's really solid. And, it's like I just get so excited to get out. Sometimes you just half-ass something or grab it and say, screw it, I'll figure it out on the run. It's like, no, just take a second. The elk can wait a minute. Tighten your damn quiver.
Yep. And it has made me more, the quiver is there to protect us from our arrows. That's why we have a quiver. So we don't have broadheads exposed and that. And, if they're made right, they're going to hold the arrow securely. And there's freak accidents that can happen even with it set up right. But like you mentioned, just another half turn or turn on the screws would have held it in there probably tight enough to keep it from potentially even coming out during that. And so just all those little things that we overlook and take for granted, it's important to stop. And
another scenario happened about a week before that. Buddy South Cox, I could have the story screwed up, but very quickly he shot a buck. He was blood trailing the buck, walking down the blood trail, and stepped on his broadhead, and it went through his ankle. So it's not like arrows falling out of your quiver is the only way to stab yourself with a broadhead. And I shot after you left, Corey, and I ended up killing a little bull, and my broadhead went through the shoulder blade, and I was sitting there trying to dig it out, because my broadheads they're not cheap. I was trying to get it out of there, and my dad walked up. He goes, "Just leave it. We don't need another." And I got to thinking, man, I was like sitting there digging at it and like just excited you kill a bull and all these things. It's like, man, I could reach in here and cut my hand. And now it's like, no, just be really careful and conscious.
Totally. Yeah. And then, I see people after a post like this or something, somebody says, I've got a scar in my thigh from a buddy who had an arrow knocked, and we were slipping up the trail and an elk was bugling, and he had the arrow on his bow and he slipped and fell and stuck it in my leg, or he turned around to look at me and cut my arm with his broadhead. So, just recognizing that these are sharp objects and we've got to treat them just like a loaded gun or anything else.
Well, I had a buddy text me afterwards, and I don't know exactly how it happened because I haven't had the chance to talk to him about it, but he had shot somehow his handgun, shot himself through the hand. So, you're right. It shouldn't be treated any different than a gun.
Yeah. Just we have to be smart. We have to be prepared. And I think that's the whole point for this podcast and for us getting back together and discussing it, is to provide a reminder, to provide the experience and what we learned, what we could have done different, how we could have been more prepared, so that hopefully if somebody else is in a situation similar to this, they're more prepared, or if somebody is in a situation that could turn into this, they're taking precautions and being more careful so it doesn't happen. And we were fortunate; things worked out well. We had what we needed. We learned from it. We've grown from it, and hopefully from sharing it with others, we're able to maybe avoid a couple more of these incidents a year.
I hope so.
Awesome.
I hope so.
Well, David, anything else? Any parting words of wisdom or?
Oh man, I don't think so. I appreciate you and Donnie and John so much, and all the help, and Brent and Eric and everybody who helped my, what ended up being an accident I had from a couple stupid errors that I made. And but it's good to have good buddies around. I think I talked about that in the last podcast I did, which was one of my 5 tips, which I think was number 3, is hunt with people that you care about and can have fun with and will take care of you and all those things. And so having a good buddy on the mountain with you is really valuable, and that was certainly worked out well for me. And I hope you can come out again, Corey, to the jungle and chase those things around again.
Oh, I will. I'll. We knew we were hunting early this year. There's no doubt, and we had some excitement. We had opportunities, and I don't want to spoil the total outcome because it was exciting, and you'll get to see that when Destination Elk launches November 12th. But I will, the next time I come out, it'll probably be a week or 2 later than what we did this year, just so I can experience the full rut and not have to maybe hunt quite as hard to solicit a bugle.
Yeah. September 10th.
Yeah.
That's when you need to come.
Awesome. Well, before we go, we try to do highlight a conservation piece from the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, just to share with our listeners where their money actually goes and what it goes to. And I've got one here. This is from, I thought it'd be appropriate to share one that pertained to Roosevelt elk, because Roosevelt Elk Habitat it's pretty, I don't know if unstable is the right word, but they need a certain kind of habitat. And you get some of that old growth, and there's no feed in there. It's sterile on the ground. And so logging is important, and providing some of that habitat's important. So there's a project that they did in Washington, and it basically permanently protected and opened access to almost 1,500 acres of wildlife and riparian habitat in Southwest Washington. And they teamed up with a timber company and with the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife to be able to, basically there was a chunk of private land that was critical habitat for elk, and it was going to be up for auction. Basically anybody could go in and buy it and do what they wanted with it. And so they worked together and were able to basically purchase that land. And the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation didn't actually purchase the land. This timber company did, but they worked with the Elk Foundation to make sure that the land stayed conserved for elk. And the Elk Foundation did put up some of the money until they were able to be reimbursed by the timber company. And anyway, doing all sorts of things like this. And I know they've been heavily involved with some logging operations, teaming up with timber companies to go in and do some of these cuts in areas where there is no feed, to be able to open it up. So you mentioned at the beginning, there's places the sun doesn't touch the ground over there. And by doing some of that logging and some cuts in these areas, it's able to open it up, it's able to breathe, it's able to grow actual habitat that the elk need to be able to live in these areas and thrive in these areas. So just one of those ways that $35 that you spend a year to be a member gets put on the ground and conserves, whether it protects access, whether it creates habitat, all of these different areas that are so important to us as elk hunters. The Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation is continually actively involved in. So awesome organization.
Amazing.
Just encourage everybody to consider going out there and being a member. If you're an elk hunter and not a member of the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, I'd love to hear why, because I can't think of a good reason not to be.
Agreed.
David, thanks so much. I know you're heading to Montana tomorrow. I'm heading to another hunt here in Idaho with the winner from our giveaway from last year with Mountain Ops, and it'll be fun to connect back up afterwards and hopefully share some stories and pictures. But good luck, be safe out there, and again, thanks so much for taking the time to share this experience and talk about it to hopefully educate those who are listening.
Yeah, thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, and good luck on that hunt.
Absolutely. Folks, thanks so much. Visit us at elktalkpodcast.com and make sure and tell your elk hunting buddies about us. Any platform that you listen to podcasts on, we're on there. And also we'll have all of these episodes available on YouTube. So keep following us, keep telling your friends, and get out there and go elk hunting.